Welcome to the Fit Vegan Podcast, the show where we help you optimize your health, fitness, and mindset on a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. My name is Maxime. I am a former triathlete, powerlifter, bodybuilder, and basketball player, and I've been vegan for over 9 years. I'm also the founder and CEO of Fit Vegan Coaching, which has helped over 500 vegans from 20 different countries to completely transform their bodies and their health. I'm excited for you to hear today's episode. Let's get into the show. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fit Vegan Podcast. Today, I am joined by Maya Acosta. Maya, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Maxime. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, of course. Very excited. I was on your show maybe like a few weeks ago or maybe like a month ago. So really happy that Mr. Robert Cheek was able to put us in contact.
Yes, I'm so grateful too. I just keep learning about wonderful people in the plant-based community and in the fitness industry now. So it is wonderful that we got connected because I continue to learn so much from you.
Yeah, well, same here. And our little worlds are interconnecting with Dr. Lori and you and Robert and kind of all those cool people. Today, I'd like to dive into your story, how you got to where you're at, and obviously some of the work that you're doing. And so let's dive into what initially brought you into the plant-based world.
Oh my goodness. Well, there are two components. There's the part of my trying to heal my relationship with food very, very early on in my life in college. So I'll mention that briefly. And then there's the other component of when I was already with my husband. When I entered the relationship, I was not on this journey at all. We came to it together, but it was really, I think I kind of led the way, believe it or not. Oftentimes people always, they tell me, oh, your husband must have been the one that told you about nutrition. And I said, no, it's the other way around. I kind of brought him on board. And that really started because when I was younger in high school, I had not a healthy relationship with food. There was a tremendous fear of gaining weight because my family were immigrants from Mexico. And as a young family of four, so my parents had four daughters, and suddenly having access to so much food, my father became a steak man. Every single day he had to have steak at dinner.
Yeah.
He sat at the head of the table and had his steak, even if we didn't have any of that. But there was a little bit of a machismo kind of thing in there. But that's the way it went. And the longer we lived here and the more immigrant family came, it's amazing that at a young age, I noticed this, but I began to notice weight problems in my family, like especially the women gaining weight. And so it didn't take long in high school. I just started starving myself. And I always want to be careful when I talk about these things because I know that it's very prevalent among women, no matter what age. But I was heavily restricting. But it was also, Maxime, I know that you're familiar with the inner work and mental health, and you have so much that you're familiar with. But as I reflect, I also realized that part of it was just really the numbing. I was, restricting heavily to not feel all the other things that I didn't want to feel, things that were happening in my household. But yes, fast forward to college. I'm a very skinny girl, underweight, and I want to go into the field of psychology. And I take a nutrition class. Nothing. I don't feel like I really learned anything. But during that time, I had some exposure where I saw a video of a cow being slaughtered, and what went. Yeah, I mean, you can imagine how profound that was because, well, I had never seen that before. And then I started to learn how what we call processed foods now, but like how sausages are prepared and how cartilage and other parts of the animals are thrown into the sausages. And I've always been a person that enjoys documentaries. So I somehow had exposure very early on. And so in college, I stopped eating red meat and pork.
Okay.
And it sounds very basic, but in a traditional Mexican household, at least the way that we were growing up, we did not just eat the typical parts of the animals. We ate the other stuff that I don't even want to mention on your show. But I eliminated many things. And from that point on, it went on like that, Maxime. I just kind of spend the rest of my adult life trying to figure out the best way to eat.
And so what did that evolution look like as you were transitioning to eating more plant-based and kind of discovering these new ways? Did you, first of all, how many years ago was that?
So when I was in college, I'm 53 now. So over 25 years ago, much longer than that was when I initially took a nutrition class. And
Yeah.
then I kind of considered myself sort of like a vegetarian. It's funny, but I often felt conflicted with eggs. So there weren't many animal-based products left, right? When you go
Yeah.
vegetarian, always conflicted with, do you eat eggs or not? And also repulsed by milk, the smell of it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I kind of really only ate seafood for the most part. And I started to have health problems in my mid 30s, and I didn't know what that was. I know that now looking back again, there was a lot of trauma and stress and being a workaholic and all of that I know contributed to my health issues. But it wasn't until I was around 40 years old that I went to a biological dentist. At the time I was living in California. And I had been doing some reading because I was into the holistic things, the natural cures and other things like that. And I remember
Yeah.
reading about the dangers of having amalgam fillings, when you feel a cavity.
Yeah.
And I started doing research, and I went to her, I found her because she was one of those specialists that removed amalgams, because they pretty much have to like wear like a hazmat suit kind of to protect themselves. And so anyway, having this conversation, she asked me, I was telling her about other health issues that I had. And she said, have you ever been tested for mercury poisoning? And I said, never. I mean, but I eat fish, so never.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had all sorts of analysis done. And sure enough, I wish I still had that piece of paper, the lab results. My levels were extreme, like poisoning, like from zero. Like I guess the body naturally, if the body is optimized, can help naturally detox some of these toxins. But if the
Yeah.
score say was from 0 to 100, I was like at 120.
Wow.
And from there, I had a lot of adrenal fatigue. I had developed hypothyroidism. I've always believed that the mercury contributed to some of these health issues. And I went to see an endocrinologist who kind of didn't really know what he was doing. I remember I took a book on hypothyroidism to him because I am that patient that does a lot of research
Listen,
before I
doctor,
see.
read this.
And he's like, you can put your book down. So he wasn't at all happy that I went in there informed. But anyway, I never really felt like he was properly treating me, and I started to gain weight. So I went from being a young girl in my 20s, fear, and even in my teens, right, being afraid of gaining weight, to suddenly finding myself in my 40s, gaining weight and feeling cold, losing my hair, all the symptoms that we tend to have when we have hypothyroidism. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that it just so happened to be that around that time I met my husband. So I was living in San Diego and he was here in Dallas. And then I relocated, and I had been prescribed all sorts of things by my endocrinologist. So I immediately blew up. Like I would say
Yeah.
that within 30 days, I must have gained like 20 pounds. It was
Wow.
ridiculous because you know how cortisol, like some of these steroids, can
Yeah.
contribute to weight gain and water retention. And I'll have to find some photos, but my face was really puffy. My legs were really thick. I was retaining a lot of water. And so little by little, my husband said, I'm going to deprescribe you, before the word deprescribe existed, right? Because I don't think people really talked about it like that. But he said, I'm going to slowly take you off all of this medication. He's just giving you too much. And okay,
Just for
so
people listening, what does your husband do for work?
oh, so my husband's a vascular surgeon, which
Yeah.
is,
Okay.
yeah, part of the reason why we do the work that we do today is because of who he sees, his patients are. So I trusted him enough to take his advice about coming off my medication. And at the time, we were living right across a Whole Foods. Like
Oh, that's dangerous. I would be there every night.
Right. It was an amazing experience. I only lived there a year. And then we found another place that I preferred because it was a building. And I'm an outdoorsy person. I don't like going down the elevator every time I want to step outside. But I would come down, Maxime, with a little cart, one of those personal carts, and I'd walk over to Whole Foods, do my groceries, and then walk back. And I just loved that Whole Foods. Well, wouldn't you know it, that same Whole Foods is where I picked up the book, The Start Solution by Dr. John McDougall.
Yeah.
And I want to say that was like in 2013. And that was the beginning of me discovering, I didn't even know this book was plant-based or, not. I didn't even know. Let's just say that I started cooking this way and everybody in the family was like, okay, we're not going to touch this food because it had no oil, no added sugar, no salt. And so time went by, but I was already, I was being introduced to the healthier versions of the foods that I like. And I also liked that Dr. McDougall changed my mindset about what people typically think about when it comes to like carbs. You hear the word carbs without actually speaking specifically about the foods you are referring to. And so suddenly I felt like I had permission to eat a sweet potato or just a potato and I'm okay. Like,
how much of a liberating feeling was that to just like
right.
remove that fear?
Right. Well, it was incredible because since I was mainly sort of a pescatarian, vegetarian, I naturally gravitated towards the other kind of more ethnic foods. So like the Vietnamese dishes or Thai dishes or anything like that, I naturally liked. A lot of vegetables and rice and pasta and things like that. Although now I know that you don't want to mass process, but for the most part, it was extremely liberating to know that, I don't have to starve. I don't have to be hungry. So I can eat the foods that are rich and satisfying, because that's part of what McDougall was talking about, is that you don't want to just eat salads. You need the foods that make you feel satisfied so that you're not hungry.
Yeah.
And so I had permission to eat, all this food. And then I understood it's the other stuff we add to the sweet potato, like the sour cream and all the other fatty things that
and the bacon bits and all that stuff. Yeah.
And the butter and the butter and all that. So I had started this process, and then my husband wasn't on board. Even though he's the scientist, he was not on board. And so then one day, so I'm doing this on my own. I decide, no judgment. I'm just going to do this for myself. And there was Freely the Banana Girl and other YouTube videos that I was watching that, encouraged me to live this way. And then I hear that Rip Esselstyn was going to come to Dallas to that same Whole Foods right across the street. And it was part of a book promotion where they also offered a meal. So I think it was for a small fee. It was kind of like buffet style. And so I took my book, and I think at the time the book was called My Beef with Meat.
Okay.
And so I take my husband and another couple, the husband of the other couple, he's a firefighter. So he was very interested in this. And, nothing was new to me because I was already being introduced to all this content. But my husband, it's like, he just like a blank stare, kind of like he had seen a ghost. I mean, he was just in shock. Could not believe what he was hearing. And he was hearing it from a firefighter. So, and so he learned that the same disease, cardiovascular disease, that my husband Riz was told many years ago during his training that he could only treat, not really reverse. You just kind of have to manage this disease. He learned through Rip Esselstyn that it could actually be prevented, and in some cases even reversed with the right foods.
Wow, that's beautiful. So Rip's work is working.
Yes. Oh my gosh, he's been such an inspiration.
Yeah. And so it seems like you mentioned Philly the Banana Girl. So did you ever try the Banana Island or the mono meals? Did you ever kind of like fall into the raw till 4?
Yes, I tried the mono. I did raw till 4, which means that all the food that you consume, mainly being, fruit, is uncooked, unprocessed until 4 p.m. And then you can have a cooked meal, but still stay plant-based. Mm-hmm. And so I had mainly mangoes, bananas, papayas, And I tried doing
All
what
the good
she did,
stuff.
all the good stuff. And until this day, I love to snack on those. And
Yeah.
so my countertops in the kitchen were all lined like a lot of these raw foodists are, you know, how they just
Yeah.
have food stuff. I even dreamed of having like
The shelf.
Robbie. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just so
Johnny
beautiful.
Juicer. Do you know who Johnny
There you
Juicer is?
Yes,
He's
yes.
a good buddy of mine. You see it in his videos. He's like a shelf of like watermelons, mangoes, papayas. Yeah.
Yeah. So I tried that. And I share this story when I talk about how people sometimes complain initially as they begin to have more fiber in their diet. They initially
Yeah.
complain about feeling bloated or maybe even retaining water and just feeling uncomfortable. Well, I did it from one day to the other because that's how I am. I'm a little extreme. Once I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And then I was doing it without really easing into it. And so the other thing that I found difficult at the time was that not all produce is ripe, right? Not
Hmm.
everything is ready to
Yeah.
be consumed when you first buy it. So that's another thing we teach, like when we have an opportunity to tell people like how to navigate the grocery store. But and then what ended up happening, which I often share as well, is that that year when I made that whole transition, we were traveling a lot. And I mean, we were going to Cancun and Hawaii and then to other conferences, and we were staying pretty busy. And I naturally gravitated towards the easy foods, which are the
Yeah.
processed foods.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I gained weight again. Yeah, I was, and at the end of the year, I said to my husband, like, honey, I don't think I'm doing this thing right. I'm not eating enough greens. I mean, I just knew the food
Yeah.
was packaged. The food that I was eating was frozen and packaged. I wasn't doing this right. So
Yeah. Let's talk about the vegetarian aspect because a lot of people, they're like, well, I'm being healthy because I'm just consuming fish. It's probably the least worst out of all of them compared to like chicken and steak and dairy and all of that. But I'm happy that you share the mercury aspect. This is a big point and people forget, right? People think that just because it's a fish, it's more innocent, would be less harmful to the body. But that fish is coming from an ocean filled with a lot of things that you don't want to be consuming.
that's right. And the other thing too that I think we really don't know where our food comes from. I mean, you'd have to do some deep research to figure out where the fish in your restaurant that you're eating at came from. I mean, some of these fish, you know, they could be grown. And I forgot what they're called, but these kind of fish ponds where they grow and
Yeah.
just they're infested in their own stuff and given growth hormones, so whatever it is. And so whether it's out in the open ocean or farmed in a
Yeah.
sense, I think you run a lot of risk of because they still absorb what's in the water.
Yeah.
And so yeah, definitely. And then anyway, I learned about so much in terms of how the fish are like sponges, like they absorb everything, even microplastics, right? Like now that's the other thing that we are really concerned about. But fish was the main, I guess, if you called it a protein back then, like the main protein
Yeah.
that I ate. Um, and then, but it's funny, as soon as I had all that dental work done, I stopped consuming anything from the ocean. No more crab legs, no more shrimp. All of that seafood went out the window. Like I was just done. And it was
Yeah.
just because I realized I had to, start allowing my body to heal, which is incredible that the body has that ability to heal. And
Yeah.
then, but yeah, that first year was really tricky because I wasn't, as much as I enjoyed cooking, there were so many things I didn't know how to prepare in the kitchen. Like I didn't know how to cook without oil.
Yeah.
You think that the meat is the main center of every meal. So you focus on that and throw in some vegetables on the side. But so it was a complete sort of like a paradigm shift for me to revisit the kitchen in a new way with new eyes. So
Yeah. Well,
yes.
if you don't mind, let's talk about those two. What are tools and strategies that people can use if they're trying to cook with no oil, and if the people are wanting to not have meat as the main dish on their plate? What are kind of some of the things that you did to help you?
Mm-hmm. Well, initially, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing, but some of the books that I really liked, I've always liked in terms of recipes. I've always enjoyed recipes by the Esselstyns. So Rip,
Yeah.
he had one of his books. I forgot forgot which one. I think it was the 7-day rescue plan taught me that if I think of meal prepping rather than recipes, but putting together food as having a bowl. So, for example, you can have a breakfast bowl. So that'll be something like oatmeal and your toppings. Lunch could be, a salad and your toppings. Dinner can be like lentils or like what I call a Buddha bowl. I begin to eat that way. So basically thinking of the daily dozen, Dr. Michael Greger, and the suggestions that he makes for the foods we should eat. Well, basically you just put them in a bowl. So you have your greens, and I like sweet potato, and you can have tofu, and you can have some grains, quinoa, for example, or lentils. And then just like a cashew sauce if you need a sauce. But we started using watermelon in our salads, and the watermelon nicely kind of blends everything and flavors the salad. And
like a little
so,
vinaigrette.
yes,
Oh, nice.
exactly.
I'll try
Yeah.
that.
And also
Yeah.
the kind of like lemon, also kind of like not lemon, but orange slices also flavor a salad nicely. And so that's how I started doing things. I wasn't trying to go out and be, have this culinary experience initially. I just wanted to know what could I eat that's simple and easy and I won't feel hungry. So that's one of the things. And I forgot the other question.
Oils. Like, how did you
Oh,
get around not cooking with oils originally?
well, I have to tell you this story. I went from buying a deep fryer that I hardly used because I don't like deep frying, period, even before I went plant-based. But I went from buying a deep fryer to not frying at all. And I only bought the deep fryer because at the time before I was, vegan, plant-based, I would replicate recipes for my husband's daughters. So if they liked food from certain restaurants, I would try to replicate them at home because I just, I enjoy being in the kitchen. And one day I decided that I was going to prepare for the girls lobster tail. And so I went to this Asian market and where you actually pick up a living lobster and
Yeah.
and they put it in, they package it for you and you bring it home and take care of it. And I must have known, life must have told me that's not for you. This is just not in you to do this.
Yeah.
But I remember cringing on the drive home as I heard it trying to escape. It was just making these noises. It was alive. And
Yeah.
then, oh my God, Maxime, I
Yeah.
don't know if you've ever done anything like that, but
Well, we killed our own chicken when I grew up on the farm, right? So we chopped the head off. We emptied the chicken, we plucked it, we did everything. So thinking back, it's crazy now, but hey, I was a kid. We were farmers. That's what we did, and that's what my dad says.
yeah,
Like, this is what you need to do. So yeah, it feels weird to think back on it now, even to the story
yes,
with the lobster,
yes.
because just the boiling, but like letting it boil while it's alive, it's just like it just gets you in the heart.
Ah, and I couldn't do that. It was my husband. I could tell he didn't want to do it either, but he's a little more courageous than I am. And so I was like, please just help me. I can't do this. I can't. And now looking back, I was saying, I can't take another life because that's what I
Yeah.
was doing. I was taking on and that was the only time I really used the deep fryer was for that and to make some tempura. And then I remember feeling my body naturally, I feel like I have very like intuitively, physically, my body really lets me know what works and what doesn't work. And I remember feeling very heavy with oily foods, deep fried
Yeah.
foods, not really liking it. And so, yeah, at the time that I made the change, I understood how
Yeah.
bad deep fried foods are. It's part of that whole, standard American way of living, Western diet. And so I didn't have to be convinced not to fry. Other things I began to learn, for example, I brought on a mushroom specialist on the show, and he told me, the mistake that people make with mushrooms is that they don't heat up the pan enough before they cook the mushrooms because the mushrooms release their own moisture, and so you actually don't even need to add any oil. Or if you do saute in some broth your onion and then add the mushroom, that itself also helps to cook the mushrooms. And so that's kind of how I started doing it. I mean, I took a culinary course through Ruby. Ruby has a program for plant-based nutrition. And I learned, just the proper way of cooking vegetables. And this was new to me as well, that in general, whether you eat cafeteria food like growing up in the school system or you go to certain restaurants, vegetables are either overcooked or they're undercooked, which is why people most likely don't like a lot of the foods like the spinach and the asparagus, even carrots are not properly cooked. And so when I studied this culinary course, I got it. I learned, how you're supposed to blanch and how you're supposed to boil certain vegetables and not too much heat here and just enough here. Not overcooking greens either, just enough to just help them kind of, what do they call it? Like reduce.
Yeah.
And so
just for the people listening, who is Rudy and who's the website for the people that potentially want to learn more?
Okay, so Ruby is spelled Rouxbe. It's an online culinary school, and anyone can take this course. And they have actually various classes. It's not all plant-based. It's whatever you want to learn, but they have a forks over knives cooking class. That's a shorter version of what I took, which was more extensive. I think it was like a 3-month or 6-month course, but you can do it at your own pace. And you're given assignments and you learn, like I said, the basics from, basic knife skills to how to entertain like a group of people. And I love being in the kitchen. So I'm that person that enjoys cooking shows. So for me, it was gratifying to take this course.
Yeah, beautiful. So definitely for people to check it out. Just wanted to basically clarify for people that hear all these amazing websites that podcast guests always share. They're like, oh, how do I find this? Where is this link? What is the name of this?
Right, exactly.
I like to dive into like your bigger mission. So you're the host of Healthy Lifestyle Solutions, which again you had me on the show like maybe a month ago. What's the bigger mission for you? What's the big thing that you're working on?
Oh, well, I'll say that the way that I started with all of this, it was really as a result of my husband's work and his patients. And so it's interesting that before meeting him, because I was into the whole holistic aspect of life, I didn't believe, till this day, I don't like taking medication. I'm just the person that prefers the natural approach to things. And then the more that I got to know him, the more that I learned about his work, and every day I hear all the stories and of, what the patients endure. So by the time you become a patient of my husband's, you're pretty far gone in terms of disease. It's pretty advanced. He sees everything from the majority of his patients live with type 2 diabetes. They've had strokes, they have heart disease, they have other health conditions, very advanced diseases, and they're usually always referred by another physician. So, they become long-term patients of my husband's. Once they see him, they just will continue to see him because he will continue to manage that disease. And so he builds long-term relationships. And I've seen, what it's like when he loses a patient as a result of complications of their diseases. He doesn't like to talk about this, but I do because I think it's important for the public to know. But he also does amputations. It's a very sensitive topic. Because no one wants to lose a limb. He has developed a limb salvage program where he intervenes and helps as much as possible to save a leg. But once a patient starts to develop, say, gangrene or fungus or some sort of infection on the foot, now they're at risk for all the other complications. And once you lose a limb, now you're wheelchair bound, now your life shrinks. You have less quality of life, and then it just continues to go downhill at that point. And he talks about the financial aspect of it too, how people go through their life savings because they're managing their disease. And so
it's expensive to be sick.
It really is. And constantly being exposed to this has in me what started to happen is that as I was diving into this world of, what it's like to be with, just a vascular surgeon and his patients. And at the same time, I was coming into this information that, what? People have more control over their health than they've ever been told. So, you know, back in the day, a doctor would diagnose an individual, a patient with whatever, and then just start writing prescriptions and managing that disease. And that's about it. And I think it's important for people to understand that lifestyle and what we eat significantly contributes to health diseases. And just a small portion is related to genetics. And I mean, all of this I just learned. I mean, this is not my field. I'm not the doctor, but I read a lot as a result of wanting to help educate people. So in 2016, I made that significant change in my life. Mm-hmm. And I immediately started telling my husband, we need to educate the patients. They deserve the right to know this. They have to know this. And so I put together some materials to educate the patients. And a lot of the material comes from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, because they make educational pamphlets that you can have in the waiting room in the doctor's office, along with posters. And you talk about the plate, that the recommendations. And that's sort of how it started. And then from there, it went to, let's start creating educational events to draw the community to understand this information. And so I partnered with the library. I started showing documentaries there. We would hold lectures, do panel discussions, potlucks. And then from there, little by little, I started learning about other people in the Dallas area that have been living this way for a while, and other people who have had heart disease and other health issues who need support. The podcast then came in 2018 when it dawned on me that maybe patients can't show up or are not willing to show up to an event because, you know, they might shy away from it. Many of them do need transportation. And so I said, this is just another way that we can reach out to people that are interested in hearing the information without necessarily showing their face. Maybe they don't want to interact with other people. And that's kind of been the mission. For me, I'm driven every day by the idea that I can help educate someone about how they can improve their lives, you know, the quality of their lives. And I'm an educator by trade. That's who I was a teacher at one time. And so I think that way, like as if I have a curriculum, but it's called a podcast, right? So it's an educational platform. That's how I see it.
Oh, beautiful. Well, you have a lot of great episodes and great guests on there. So just for the people listening, I will put your link for the podcast in the show notes so people get to listen to it and they get to listen to our episode together.
Yeah, thank you. It's been amazing too, because from that point, as Riz and I were learning all of this stuff, we learned about the blue zones. And then we learned about lifestyle medicine, and we started to see, oh, well, the blue zones, the areas in the world where people live the longest without advanced disease, they have these components that the American College of Lifestyle Medicine trains, you know, healthcare providers on, which is, you know, a plan forward lifestyle or diet, you know, being active in your community, managing your stress, having healthy relationships. And so it just all made sense. So when my husband decided to become board certified in that field of lifestyle medicine, I was helping him study. And of course, I had to read the materials too, because I'm just like intrigued by it all. And so I started absorbing all this knowledge. And that's when sort of I rebranded the podcast from the name that I used to have it under to Healthy Lifestyle Solutions, because the word lifestyle is what we're teaching, lifestyle medicine. And so I cover those topics. Nutrition is always very, very important, but we talk about the importance of getting adequate sleep, you know, meditation, mindfulness, mental health. As a matter of fact, my life coach will be coming on pretty soon. And so I'm promoting building healthy relationships, and even that's leading now to more events. I was telling you earlier that we hosted Dr. Lori Marvis like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I can't remember because so much has happened. And I basically, you know, got partnered with another support group. We go by pods as part of Plant Pure communities. They're support groups. And we drew out over 120 people to the library to watch a documentary. And Dr. Lori Marvis flew in for it. And I mean, the questions were intriguing because people are at different levels of their journeys. And then at the same time, the mingling and the connections that happen afterwards, that sense of building community and support is like what drives me. When I see these things happen and manifest, I'm just like, oh, it's happening. People need this. They need to find each other. They need to find support.
Yeah. Where can people can learn more about how to access these events?
Yeah. Okay. So I still am. So I'll give you the website. We are going through a rebrand with that website, but so far it's still plantbaseddfw.com. And
Okay.
that's where I'm listing those events. And I was telling you, my life coach is coming on my podcast, and now we're bringing her work to Dallas for a couples retreat.
Oh,
And
awesome.
and she has the experience and knowledge of blue zone living, and she's plant-based too. So how lucky am I? Like I've
Yeah,
been
it's going
work
to be a great event.
it's going to be an amazing event. And I've been working with her for over 2 years. When things started to come up during the pandemic, I was like, okay, there's more work that I need to do on myself and my issues that I don't want to face. And so it's been incredible what she's done in terms of helping me grow. And so I just began to see, Maxime, kind of like the work that you do, that the more guests I bring on the show, the more it adds to my own life. Like, I'm so fortunate that I can sit here with specialists and pick their brain in many ways and learn from that, because I'm growing as an individual. And I feel like if I'm growing, my listeners must be growing as well.
Yeah, for sure. The podcast is great. There's always a little bit of a selfish component to it because like, well, I got some questions for me that I would like answered. Otherwise, I would never be able to talk to this person. So,
That's
so
right.
for the couples retreat, for people that might be interested, when are the dates for that?
Okay, so that's October 13th through the 15th. It'll be here in Dallas. We're only taking up to 10 couples. And I don't have the link yet up. I wish I had. I don't know when this is going to come out. It's going to come out. I'm going to
End of
have it up.
August.
Oh, then by then, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we'll have the link in the bio for people.
Yeah. So October 13th through the 15th, we're only taking 10 couples because we want it to be, personal, and there'll be activities. And I didn't mention this, but Michelle and Dean Yasuda, our life coaches, are trained in that whole Big Leap and Hendricks Institute material.
Oh,
So
awesome.
yes, and that's exactly when I started to hear you talk about the Big Leap, and really it was more the words just left me right now, but when we expand and we hit the upper limit. So yes, so it's a small world. It's amazing. I feel like I continue to attract the people and that are in that same vibration, that same field, because I was listening to you and I started to talk. I realized that you talk about the upper limit, and that's exactly what Michelle and Dean teach us. Even in a marriage, you can hit the upper limit. And what
Yeah.
is that? When you're expanding and you're growing, and we naturally want to bring ourselves down. So we cause an argument, or we start to worry, or, just something happens. And so I've been working with her for over 2 years. So I see her every week. And now I'm doing
Yeah.
this mantra that you probably do from the Big Leap. I'm doing it every day, which I just want to read out loud for your listeners as well. But I say to
Yeah.
myself, I expand in abundance, success, and love every day as I inspire those around me to do the same. And so that's
Beautiful.
exactly, when I have that mentality, it's not just about me, it's about expanding myself, but also wishing the same for everyone else that I come in contact with. And then it moves me from everybody becomes sort of like my ally, right? And
Mhm.
so Michelle teaches that, like in a marriage, that rather than seeing each other as divided and as the enemy, remember to get on the same side. You are allies in this together. And then you shift the mentality in terms of like how you're viewing a problem. And so I love the work that she does so much that I want to bring it to my community. And I
Yeah.
would love for other people to know about it too.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. Yeah, I love Gay Hendricks' work. I think you saw that, right? I had him on the
Yes.
show maybe like a few
Yes.
months ago. Yeah, just awesome, very vibrant man. I think he was just recovering from his accident because he had like an injury of some sort, but
Yeah.
very, very vibrant man for his age, is just full of life. You can see it in his eyes. And it's such a great concept. And it's true, like upper limiting does show up everywhere. It will show up in your personal relationship, in your business, in your finances, in your relationship, in some of your friendships. And I think it's really powerful work that you get to bring to people.
Yes. And around the time that he had that injury, we went to Ojai, California for the Katie Hendricks led the couples workshop that we went to, and our life coaches facilitated that. So they're like the right hand to Katie Hendricks, to both of them.
Yeah.
And so Katie, it had just happened the week prior to the actual couples workshop, and so she was very sensitive and expressed what happened and talked about the upper limit. And I love the openness and how vulnerable she allowed herself to be in sharing something so personal. And then, yes, I've been following him now on social media and seeing his recovery and how it's like he bounced back. Like when he was with you, it was like, wait, you would have never known he had this injury.
Oh yeah, no, you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell.
Yeah.
Perfect. And so for the people listening, how can they support you on the mission that you're on? Because I think it's beautiful what you and your husband are doing. Obviously, we're in the same space, me, you, Dr. Lori, Matt, the whole plant-based advocate movement. So how can people support you in the work that you're doing?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, basically, I guess if you follow us and say, I do have a link for a newsletter if you're interested in that. I put together this wonderful guide. It's a 20-page guide on how to prevent cardiovascular disease, and it's really associated with lifestyle medicine. You'll learn a little bit about my husband and the work that he does. And, in terms of clearing the arteries and the recommendations that he now makes for his patients. And then I threw in there some recipes and things like that. So if you follow us, I send out a newsletter explaining all that is happening. But if you want the link for that, it's bit.ly/join Dr. Riz, and that's DRRIZ. And Maxime, I guess the most important thing for me is just to get the word out when we're offering anything. So we do events locally, but now I'm doing webinars with other experts. So I'm giving them a platform for them to showcase the work that they're doing when they're supporting other people. So like this weekend, I have back-to-back, like 3 days in a row, live events that I'm doing to support other experts, because I see anyone like yourself, like Dr. Marvis, you become a tremendous resource for my followers, for my community as well. And so that's how we support one another. So just go to, follow our newsletter, and then, I'll let you know about our Eventbrite. That's where I post almost all the events, so that if you know someone who can benefit from some of the content that we share, then please share it.
Yeah, beautiful. So for everyone, I'll put all the link down below. That way you just got to click on them and they'll bring you to where you need to. Maya,
Yes.
I always like to end on words of wisdom. So if you had the opportunity to speak to you before you went plant-based with all of your knowledge that you have now, what is something that you would share to young Maya that, again, may be listening right now?
Wow. This is an exercise I need to do privately. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to go do that. I'll be back. No, it's a beautiful thing that you just asked, because I think of the tremendous fears that I had growing up. I had health concerns. After my nutrition class in college, I began to suspect my parents were at risk for type 2 diabetes. And sure enough, they both have type 2 diabetes. And they would have never been diagnosed had I not pushed them to go get tested. So I guess, looking back, I've always felt like when I was younger, like I wanted to be a healer. Like I just wanted to help people heal, but not just
Yeah.
physically, emotionally. And so, but it starts with us. Like if I'm not taking care of myself, I can't help other people. And so one
Yeah.
of the most important things that I now know that I didn't know most of my life was how to take care of myself, how to set proper boundaries so that I put myself first, so that I can give to other people. And so that would probably, and that can include like even taking care of, my health associated with what I eat, getting adequate rest, managing my stress. So it's all that lifestyle component. So if I could just go back, I would put my hand on her chest and just, comfort her and tell her that life is going to support me, that life always brings us the right tools and the right people. Once we're focused on what we want, we begin to attract it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those are
Yep.
beautiful words of wisdom. I want to say a massive thank you for taking the time to jump on the show. Thank you for sharing so authentically your story, providing so much value. And again, for the people listening, all the links will be down in the show notes below. So you can go and show some love to Maya, to her podcast, subscribe to her newsletter, check out her YouTube and the amazing work that she's doing.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.